perspective on the effectiveness of ADB Accountability Mechanism and safeguards delivery. We're going to give folks just 5 more minutes because it's raining and people are running late. So bear with us. Thank you so much. Let me know what you're feeling me. Okay. Thanks, everyone. So we will be starting in 1 minute. Great. Okay, I think we can get started. So good morning and welcome everyone to a ground-up perspective on the effectiveness of ADB Accountability Mechanism and Safeguards Delivery, organized by NGO Forum on ADB. So my name is Iromi Pereira and I'm with the Bank Information Center in DC, and I'll be the moderator for this panel today. So first, to go over some housekeeping and logistics before we start the panel. I would like to remind everyone to be mindful that this is a safe space for all of you to engage. And we ask that you ask permission first before taking any photographs, as some participants and speakers may not wish to be photographed. So just be mindful of that. And today we will be using Pigeonhole Live for our Q&A session. Pigeonhole Live is a simple interactive mobile website where you can submit questions to the panel of speakers. So if you have a smartphone, a tablet, or a laptop computer with you, you can launch your internet browser and enter www.pigeonhole.com and into the address bar. The event passcode is Milan 2025. So again, to repeat, Milan 2025, and you can also use this QR code from your mobile phones if you wish to ask any questions. However, just to say that we will prioritize questions from those of you who are here with us in person in the session. And lastly, to say, this session will follow a different format. It's a town hall setup, as you can see, which means it will be more open, more participatory, and focused on dialogue. So there are no slide presentations, and we encourage our audience to also engage with our session speakers in the Q&A. It also means that the speakers won't be going into great detail about cases and of projects, and whatever that they are covering from their own experiences will not be an exhaustive list, but they will be sharing key issues and perspectives. So to go into the session, so today you will gain first-hand insights into the realities faced by project-affected communities, offering a grounded understanding of the effectiveness of ADB safeguards and accountability mechanisms in practice. This is a critical examination, and it's particularly timely as the ADB reviews its accountability mechanism. It serves as a litmus test, highlighting where the current system falls short and identifying areas for urgent reform. This is especially urgent given the introduction of the new environment and social framework, which aims to guide the bank's projects towards more sustainable and socially responsible outcomes. In that, we're very happy to see folks from the Office of the Safeguards here in the audience as well today. So we appreciate that you all are here today. And this also provides a unique opportunity for the bank to reflect on the lived realities of those impacted by ADB finance projects, many of whom have suffered significant harm due to deficiencies in the implementation of safeguards rather than flaws in the policies themselves. Today, you will hear from community members and civil society, sharing experiences and perspectives from the ground, but also from their engagement at a policy level with management and the accountability mechanisms. We are also pleased to have with us the two heads from ADB's accountability mechanism and a member from the ADB board working group that is reviewing the accountability mechanism at present. So welcome to all our panelists, and hope to have a fruitful discussion today. So to start, I would like to welcome Hemant Vithanage, the International Committee Chair, NGO Forum on ADB, to share his perspectives.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. So I'm in the middle of two bank representatives and also in front of me, two elephants. I hope you notice. Why elephants? One of the projects funded by the Asian Development Bank is Upper Alhara Canal project, and we are trying to understand how we bring accountability claim, where to bring, because it's not only the Asian Development Bank, and partly it's AIIB and the Qatar Fund and Kuwait Fund. It's a river diversion project, and they built a large dam to store about 900 MCM water, but the river actually has only 200 plus, less than 300 MCM. So in order to bring adequate water, they propose another river diversion, and they brought water, still not adequate. Now in Sri Lanka, we have a large river, the longest river called Mahaveli River. Now it is already harnessed. There are 7 reservoirs, and they are trying to bring water through a tunnel built under the Knuckles Conservation Area. It's a forest, very pristine forest, one of the important forest area in Sri Lanka. Now the water remains water. They didn't have the canal system to bring water to the small canals. They put all the water into Min area reservoir. It's an ancient tank, and there were more than 350 elephants depending on the grassland of this reservoir. But unfortunately, all the grassland was destroyed because of the high water level, and the elephants were dispersed, and many elephants died, and the small ones died. Now the elephants don't have food there. So it was called the the largest Asian elephant gathering, but unfortunately it was destroyed. Now, this is one of the example I want to bring here, how the safeguard is going to play a role here. The second is the Mana wind power project. So now, when Asian Development Bank, we are happy about that, because when the Mana wind power project was proposed, it was about 52 turbines, but then we found it is located in the bird migration route, and 15 million birds reach Sri Lanka through this bird migration route. But then when we oppose, actually, the US executive director sent 3 people's mission to Sri Lanka, and there I propose, why not we run a emergency radar shutdown system. Of course, it was supported by the Asian Development Bank and reduced the number of turbines. But unfortunately, when the study was done, we never identified the flooding is going to be a problem there. Now the people in the area is suffering flooding because of the road constructions, and the road constructed in between the turbines, and there's no water. It has stopped the water seepage. Now people are complaining about the flooding. I have visited 2 months ago, and the whole area and half of Mana, which is a sort of a peninsula, small island, and now it is flooded half of the year. So these are some of the implications. Now, in that case, definitely it is very old. The impact is the flooding impacts now only we see, and now there's no time for inspection or the accountability process. Now, the previous one, we're trying to understand. Of course, Qatar Fund, Kuwait Fund, they don't have a mechanism, and we have the AIIB and the ADB, and where we want to bring the accountability claim. So I'll stop there, and I will share other stories later. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Hemantha. I'd like to call Sukarel Dukasaran from OT Watch, Mongolia, to share her remarks.
Good morning. Thank you. I'm going to talk about ADB's GARE Area Development Investment Support Project in Ulaanbaatar, capital of Mongolia. It is an ongoing project, but we have received complaints from communities that were being displaced. The issues with this project is land grab at very low prices or at no cost. The project is to clear land from under over 900 plots, which in Mongolian tradition, where people live in hotel, this is a tradition where they live in 2-3 families on one plot, which essentially means 1,800 households to be displaced, but only 150 complained. An MOU was signed with Ulaanbaatar municipality, the project implementation unit, and the complainants. Now, the issue is with how the problem solving complaints were received, and we went into problem solving mode under this complaint, is that knowing that the same thing happening across the project, the problem solving unit just solves the problems of those around 150 complaints, regardless of the fact that the MOU was to be implemented across the project. It's not happening. So just couple of months ago, small businesses which have lost their land and business to land clearing wanted to complain, and they requested a training. We had set up date and place for training, but it was cancelled on the orders of the city governor, Ulaanbaatar capital governor. So the issue is that ADB's project implementation unit is very much working on the government side. That's one thing, that the complaints mechanism is solving problems just for the complainants or for project to be able to continue business as usual. This is one issue. The other issue is because ADB has started its urban development project in 5 Western provinces, applying the same principle. That is where we are worried about coming in with land use regulation from sedentary cultures into a nomadic setting where there are different traditions, and licensing land title is issued to only one family, while 3 families on the same plot may have same rights to that land. So only one household is receiving compensation and others are being kicked off, regardless of the fact that, you know, they have the same right and title to that land, customary right. So this is an important issue that needs to be solved, looked at, and we are very.
If you
last sentence. We're very concerned because ADB's climate smart critical minerals project is going into provinces where there is already very strong opposition to mining and sentiment to protect the pastures and right to water and pasture. Thank you.
Thank you, Sukarel. Next, we have Jiten Yumnam from the Center for Research and Advocacy, Manipur in India.
All right. Good morning, everyone. I will share my experience based on 2 complaints raised to the complaint mechanism. These are 2 infrastructure road projects under the SASEC, South Asia Sub-Economic Cooperation. So the first complaint is regarding the Kangchip to Tamenglong road project. So when the complaint was filed, I think the community affected on environmental and indigenous right violation, they presented concrete cases of violations, of safeguard violation. But then the complaint was found ineligible, and then ineligible, and in fact, the problem solving could not be pursued as well. So this also led to a question as to how the challenges of eligibility criteria, that is one. And also the question to ADB, also how ADB can respond to violations when communities present concrete cases of violations. So that is one area. And then there is another complaint is on another infrastructure project, the Imphal Town Ring Road project. So then there are multiple issues of safeguard violations on the environmental front, on the issues around, say, for example, one concrete violation is eviction notice were issued even before the project documents are prepared. There is concrete cases of the no free prior informed consent of the affected communities. So and in fact, the OSPF team was able to visit the communities recently. But then there are issues around reprisal. So there were threats. Threat took place in 2 ways. One is summoning the affected communities to agree to the project, by the local authority. So this is a clear-cut case of violation of the free prior informed consent of the affected community. Another one is a reprisal more in terms of threats, to the affected community, so involving the law enforcing agencies and also, asking them to withdraw the complaint and, all sort of. So there is there. So in these 2 cases, it led to a series of concern. And also the things that I also want to request ADB is also to ensure that the confidentiality issues of the affected communities is fully respected, because when they file complaint, the request is for maintaining the confidentiality. but then, we feel that that is not ensured. No? So how do we ensure the confidentiality of the affected communities when they file complaint? And then another is on to ensuring the zero tolerance on reprisal, to ensure the protection of community who file complaint, but also to ensure the protection of community who are affected as well. So I think this is one very critical area. And it also led to the clear communication with the local authority, with the government, no? On the accountability mechanism, on the prevention of reprisal, on the protection of the communities, for example, and I think, and also the implementation of safeguard. I also want to reiterate, this is something that I raised earlier as well. It's extremely important to ensure that even if ADB has a strong safeguard, that it is extremely important to ensure the local authorities and those who are implementing the borrowing countries fully uphold these safeguards in spirit and in practice. And I think this is really, really important. Yeah, and then finally, to respond to the concern raised by the communities, because when they file complaint, it's not just about the protection of community. It's important, but what matters at the end of the day is responding to the rights, to the concern, and also the demands for the affected community. Like some demands may be very simple demands, like alternatives to development, just development, sustainable development. So which may involve a participatory process, a meaningful and effective rightful consultation. So I think these are some of the issues that I want to raise and ask the ADB to respond to this. Yeah, thank you very much.
Great, thank you so much, Jiten. And now I would like to call on Pranav Dole, the spokesperson of the Karbi Anglong Solar Power Project Affected People's Rights Committee from Assam.
Good morning, everyone. So this is majorly funded by the Asian Development Bank. It's taking up an landmass of 2,500 hectare and directly impacting 24 villages comprising of more than 20,000 indigenous population, and along with it, a couple of thousand of tenant farmers. So the whole process of due diligence, or the process of coming up with the project in itself, we have found out has been very flawed, because the agencies that were implemented or employed there have not taken up the whole process in a fair manner, which utterly didn't respect the free, prior, and informed consent of the people there. Because the public hearings were, made with in a situation where people didn't have the freedom to express their concerns. And also the environmental impact assessment which was done was found to be very flawed. The reason has been resided by the Karbi, Naga, and the Adivasi communities for hundreds of years. And this space, the community's main claim is that is governed under the 6th schedule of the Indian Constitution. And by law, the customary rights of the indigenous communities are primary. But in this case, we have found that that has not been the case. And the government has been playing a divide and rule policy over there, where false land owners are being created overnight, and the people actually who belong there have not been consulted in the whole process, or what kind of loss that they're going to accrue. So it's the life of more than 20,000 indigenous communities. And along with it, the space where the solar power project is coming up, Assam per se, the government themselves have acknowledged the fact that it's not conducive for producing solar power. Besides that, the land where this project is coming up, it's not a plain or flat land. It's a hilly area. So imagine 25 square kilometers of hills and forests that are going to be raised down, which will take away the habitats of not only human beings, but elephants and many other primary species which share the land along with the communities there. So it is rendering homeless not only the people, but also a very important flora and fauna from the region. The rules that are there for environmental protection or biodiversity protection are also not being followed up in this case, where there has been no environment impact assessment and a public hearing that has been done with the communities. So overall, and also the whole people of Karbi Anglong, the kind of exploitation that is happening there, this 2,500 hectare adds up to the other many such projects, and it is going to it's overburdening the whole space altogether. And the people have directly resisting this project since 2023, when the news about the project came up. There has been repeated representations to the local authorities, and of late also to the Asian Development Bank authorities. And we request the ADB representatives to take this up very seriously and withdraw the project, because in the community and the people living there, that's their primary demand. That's what they want. There's no other negotiation that they're going up to. There is a strong resistance in the ground. The nearly accessible authorities, which is the state government, which is the Karbi Anglong Autonomous Council government, there has been regular representations to them in forms of democratic protest and rallies. And we would request the ADB to take cognizance of all these facts and respect the as in like the proposal of the people. Thank you.
Thank you, Pranab. Next, we have Indira Shrish from the Indigenous Women Legal Awareness Group in Nepal.
Thank you for this opportunity. I'm from Nepal. I'm representing from Tanaho hydropower impacted by indigenous community. And I want to express about the ADB Accountability Mechanism, Safeguard Deliver. It's a very beautiful and powerful word. So safeguard policy and international human rights standards such as those outlined in the Declaration of the Rights of Indigenous Peoples are critical tools for protection indigenous communities affected by development projects. However, the real challenge lies in their implementation, despite strong legal and policy frameworks. And those standards often remain on paper unless actively enforced. The responsibility to implement then lies not only with the national and local governments, but also with project development and international financial institutions and regulatory bodies. And these actors must be held accountable to ensure that indigenous rights are respected, protected, and fulfill the practice, and not just promoted to the theory. It should be impracticable. And I would like to clear to Tanahu, the indigenous community affected by the Tanahu hydropower project have lost their customary lands and demanding compensation through a land for land approach. They believe their customary land holds culture and spiritual values, not as known as good. Good is a customary institution which cannot be measured solely in monetary term. So the affected indigenous community are at the risk displacement to the Tanaho hydropower project. The affected indigenous community have expressed strong grievances over the loss of their customary land, cultural identity, and lack of meaningful consultation, and are demanding land for land compensation and respect of their good institution. The displacement and loss of customary land without free, prior, informed consent constitute a serious violation of the indigenous people's human rights, including their rights to land, culture, and self-determination. The affected communities are currently, since 2018, engaged in a problem-solving process, but it is prolonged and ineffective given the serious human rights violation involved, including displacement and loss of indigenous lands, and process must be fast-tracked to ensure timely justice and redress. The local government has been extracting cyan from community land without providing any information and compensation, despite repeated pleas from the affected communities to stop this action and ensure their fair compensation. Their voice have not been addressed. Finally, justice delay is justice deny. Respectfully, I to say the promulgate resulting process is deepening the suffering of Tanoho indigenous community affected by the Tanoho hydropower project. Immediately action is needed to uphold their rights and deliver meaningful redress. Thank you.
Thank you, Indira. Next, I'd like to call Maya Corino from the Legal Rights and Natural Resources Center in the Philippines.
Thank you. When we go out to the lake and fish, are we going to be electrocuted by the floating solar farm? This is the question of a fisherman concerned about the Laguna floating solar project, which received technical assistance from the Asian Development Bank. This project is 2,000 hectares. It's going to produce 2.5 gigawatts of electricity and supposed to power 2 million households. Apart from the issue raised by that fisherman earlier, the other issues would be, number one, there are not enough consultations. Number two, they are not clear, just like the fisherman, on the environmental impacts of the project. Even though it has gotten the green signal, there is no environmental impact assessment as of yet. They are also concerned about their livelihoods because they will not be able to go out to the lake with the solar farms being barriers to them. And also when we went there, we saw that in the consultations, because to be fair, there were consultations, women were absent. Men are considered to be the primary stakeholders for fisherfolk communities. So what are their demands? When we talk to them, the first one is distributive justice. They would like to receive shares from profits, from revenues. They would like also to be employed for the installation of the solar farm. It's civil engineering, it's quite easy to do. So they are very open to training. Number two, procedural justice. Not enough consultations being done, and some people are left out of the consultations. Number three, restorative justice. As I mentioned, there is no EIA, so we are not sure of the impact of the floating solar farm on the freshwater ecosystem. We need more information on that. And number four, remedial justice. We believe that they need to be provided with access to remedy if there are going to be problems at the project level. Our call to the ADB. The first one is on safeguards, not necessarily for this project, but other projects. On the ground, there is really confusion around who is the funder and who is the implementer and what mechanisms, therefore, can they access, if it's accountability or it's really the corporate mechanism. But going back to the problem of the solar farm and energy in general, our call to the ADB is to embed principles of justice already in technical assistance grants that concern regulatory frameworks. Because when you do this, you are already ensuring that principles of justice will guide the implementation of projects. And that's very important. Imagine if your regulatory framework, your technical assistance framework changes society. Imagine if you lift people out of poverty because you provide jobs, you give employment. Imagine if your project transforms relationships between men and women because you include women in consultations. Renewables are getting a bad reputation now because the impacts are not managed. Because renewable does not always mean sustainable, and sustainable does not always mean just. Justice must be at the heart of all the projects that ADB supports in terms of the energy transition. Thank you.
Thank you, Maya. And now we have Aaron Pedrosa from the Philippine Movement for Climate Justice.
Mayong buntag. Thank you, Eromi. This is addressed to Llewellyn Roberts. I hope I mentioned his name correct, and to the ADB management in the room. No? Let me tell you about our story. The compliance review panel found the Asian Development Bank management to have violated 4 or 5, but lumped into 3 policies: the environmental policy, policies on consultation, public disclosure, social dimensions, and the energy policy. This pertains to the Visayas Powered Development Project in Cebu. CRP then recommended 4 work streams, and while relevant studies have been undertaken, these were not articulated to the affected communities and even to the complainants. In 2023, through the former CRP chair, we discovered that the technical assistance was provided to the Philippine government. But by then, it was 6 years too late, since it was 6 years since the 5-year monitoring period was over, and 2 years since the technical assistance was granted. There's something wrong with this. Wait, sorry. But even as we found out that there was this technical assistance, take note that the time the complaint was filed, this was the first concerning a private sector project and the 4th in the complaints registry involving a coal plant projects. At the time when Naga, the location of the project, was found to have morbidity and mortality rates higher than national averages. This was at the time when the coal plant project was not yet in operation. So imagine what is the situation right now. Of the 5 complainants, 1 is already dead. And yet no remedies have been realized or actualized for the affected communities. While the work streams were ticked as already completed on the side of the ADB management, to this day, the affected communities, the complainants, have never been party to any consultations or any discussion, even to the results of the studies undertaken. But take note, these are just studies. At the end of the day, it boils down to remedies. Remedies connected to the displacement of communities, health impacts, air pollution, dislocation from traditional fishing grounds, so on and so forth. No remedial action. We understand that the safeguards are put in place to ensure that the ADB stays on the lane by complying its own standards, so that a project, when it is approved, it is compliant with existing safeguards and mechanisms and standards insofar as the project is concerned. Once the management goes out of the lane because of violation of the standards, the accountability mechanism, the safeguards, must provide for corrective actions. We have not seen this in our case. So at the end of the day, the sentiment of the community is that there is no justice without remedies. Otherwise stated, there is continuing injustice precisely because the harms felt by the community remain to this very day unaddressed. Thank you.
Thank you, Aaron. And next we have Vidya Dinka from Growth Watch in India.
Imagine it's 2012. You are 30, rather short and easily confused. Also, suddenly widowed. 2 young kids to support. What do? You just gird up, tuck in your sari into your waist, and try to run your husband's small restaurant business by the side of the road. Selling rice, potatoes, fish, tea, snacks. By the time I met Malathi Mondal in 2019, she was a successful restaurant owner. She had struggled. People in the beginning would walk away without paying her, etc., but she learned the ropes. Thereafter, but she was very, very worried when I met her, and this is, I think, July 2019, because she had seen that all the shopkeepers along the length of the road before her had to make way for pipe laying exercise. By who, she did not know. Who were the funders? She didn't know. Had she been consulted? Had she been invited? Had she been read out and any entitlement matrix? No. All she had heard is, if you do not dismantle your restaurant at of course her own cost and take it away, the excavator would come and destroy it. She was very, very worried, so she spoke to Montu, who is a bag repairer just before her, just the person just before her shop. And the two of them trudged to the local municipality office called the ward office to ask the councillor what can be done about this. They were confused. They thought he is the only person to offer them some advice. They were both shooed away. Other shopkeepers before them had followed the same route, gone in confusion to the local people's representative, and at best, they were sent to the police station for more information. So there was no information shared there, and some of them had banded together as a committee of the shopkeepers, and the president and the secretary and a couple of others had been called to a consultation, but it was just unilateral, where they were told, you are squatters, this is government land. They never denied it, but they had all had their shops there for 25 or 30 years. And yet they were told, dismantle, and if you are good and if you cooperate, maybe we will help you come back. All of them dismantled their shops, took it away at their own personal cost. Malathi Mondal said, mine was a large thing. It cost me 15,000 Indian rupees just to dismantle my little restaurant. But come 2025, none of the project affected, and I'll tell you which project, have been able to re-establish their shops. Malathi tried, because she's a fighter. She came back, but she was shooed away by the contractor saying, what the hell are you doing? Take all of this away. Who has given you the permission to re-establish the shop? She begged them. She said, when you asked me to take it away, you said maximum a month or two. And why are you asking me not to come back now? And so this month or two has been 5 years. She began selling her tea with this little kettle that I brought for you all the way from Kolkata, where the Kolkata Environmental Improvement Investment Program, funded by the ADB, has rendered all the shopkeepers along Mahatma Gandhi Road without any livelihood. There are many beautiful artifacts from regions affected by ADB-funded projects at the Voices of the Affected, a little exhibition there, but this symbolizes the battered lives of the project affected. As there are many things to say, but I'll just end with one thing. As recent as 2025 February, I accompanied some of the shopkeepers, about 15, who could gather up the courage and go to the municipal councillor's office. They were insulted right before my eyes. They were shooed out of a public office. They were in the night, many of the party goons visited them personally and said, how dare you come and insult our corporator and bring these outsiders? If you do not take back your complaint, because we had taken them to the project implementing unit office 2 in Kolkata. If you do not take back your complaint, you will never be able to reestablish your shops, and we will see that you're driven out. in this context, how do you expect people to even go up to the ADB or to any accountability mechanism? Access is something they clearly do not have to any remedy or accountability.
Thank you, Vidya. Next, we have Radhika Goyal from the Accountability Council.
So we've already heard the scale of safeguards violations and harm that ADB projects can have from all of our speakers. And we've also heard the clear demands that different communities have. And through the accountability mechanism, ADB has an opportunity to hear these demands at an early stage and facilitate remedy at an early stage. And that's what we want the accountability mechanism to do. But in order for that to happen effectively, the AM must be accessible and it must be remedy oriented. On accessibility, what we want is that communities are able to directly access the accountability mechanism without having to go to any other GRM before, whether it's management or the project level. And I guess this is the question that I have for our responders, which is, what are you worried will happen if communities are able to access the AM directly, given that we know two things to be true? One, that there is no flood of frivolous cases. That is a myth that the data does not support, and we can provide that, and we already have. And two, that many communities that reach out to AM fear retaliation and request confidentiality. And so, they're taking a risk to even raise complaints. So I guess that's the question I have. What do you fear will happen? On remedy, I just want to share a quick a case study. Recently, the communities that filed a complaint to the Tata Mundra project described the compliance review process as a waste of time for complainants and wasteful expenditure. You might think, wow, management and communities finally agree on something. But actually, what communities were describing as a waste of time was the process through which the management came up with the action plan. So I think we sometimes forget that even under an accountability mechanism, ultimately, it is the management that has to resolve and facilitate solutions. That is the role that they play. Under the 2003 policy, the previous policy, the compliance review panel was supposed to come up with a broad set of recommendations on which the management was supposed to come up with an action plan. However, under the 2012 policy, that power of the compliance review panel was taken away. Management was also not required to consult communities in the process of coming up with an action plan. However, communities wanted to be consulted. They went as far as coming up with the people's action plan and putting it on, sharing it with management, but ADB management refused to engage. Ultimately, the plan that came out had very little community-facing commitments, and the complainant rejected the plan as lacking genuineness, ambition, and imagination. All parties, including ADB, walked away from that experience poorer for it. And, in 2023, the cost-benefit analysis report found that none of CRP's findings had been fully addressed, and a lot of money had been spent, including ADB's money. Compare this with the experience of the Cambodia Railway project 2 years ago, 2 years prior to that case, where compliance review panel was able to make a recommendation that management based its action plan on. Representatives have described it as a rare example of a project in which compliance review processes and subsequent remedial action resulted in extensive material improvements in the well-being of affected households. And in 2021, ADB agreed. They said that the project had demonstrated the effectiveness of the accountability mechanism and its ability to make sure that compliance was achieved and negative impacts were removed. And we have all of this in our submission. So I guess what I'm trying to say is that what makes an AM effective, even for ADB, is when remedy is achieved. So it's not just about communities, it's about why ADB is engaging in this exercise as well. And so I think that is our main focus for our review, which is that if you want a better mechanism, it has to be a mechanism that puts remedy at center, and management is a key stakeholder. And so the accountability mechanism the policy must allow management to actually do that effectively. That's all.
Thank you, Radhika. And thank you to all our panelists. And that brings to a close the first round of sharing, which is from the CSOs. And I guess just to sum up, you'll see that we've covered a whole range of issues today, both past cases and ongoing projects, to showcase the complexity of development funding and how communities navigate different banks, different frameworks, their own socio-political context, as well as cultural context, and why we continue to push for stronger policies, but also stronger implementation. And so panelists today have covered issues regarding reprisals, lack of consultations, the trade-offs between renewable energy and loss of livelihood and customary land, how on the ground, it's not as easy to kind of very cleanly delineate what the banks are, who the implementing agency is, what the different documents are, what the grievance redress mechanism is, what the accountability mechanism is. These are all extremely blurry and complex. And issues around clarity of project responsibilities, timely disclosure, the long road to access accountability, but also barriers even after remedy has been mandated. And at the heart of all of this is the clear demand from communities, all these demands and from communities whose voices should have been at the front and center of all these projects. Before we move on to round two, just a reminder, because we can see lots of photographs being taken, and many of you joined the session late, just to say, as we have a lot of community folks here who are also facing reprisals and issues in their own home countries, to be mindful of the photographs that you take, how you use them, how you post them. It would be also very good if you could speak to them before perhaps you post on social media, particularly with attribution. With that, we would like to move on to our second round. I would like to now call on Alternate Executive Director Llewellyn Roberts, who sits on the board working group that's reviewing the accountability mechanism review. Alternate ED is Llewellyn Roberts is the alternate ED for Armenia, Cook Islands, Fiji, Indonesia, New Zealand, Samoa, and Tonga. Llewellyn, over to you.
Kia ora, tēnā koutou katoa, everyone. Thank you for inviting me on to the stage today. And first, also, I just wanted to acknowledge the presentations we've heard over the last few minutes. I think it reminds us all about, why a strong functioning accountability mechanism and ESF is fundamental to the work that MDBs do. I also wanted to acknowledge the Accountability Council's submission, which I read yesterday. I think you submitted it 2 days ago. I found that really important for the work that we are doing going forward. And I'll come back to that process in a minute. For me, so I've been at the bank now for 18 months, coming from the New Zealand Ministry of Foreign Affairs. And for me, it's been really important to kind of get my head around is the purpose of the multilateral development bank ecosystem. And for me, what I kind of keep coming back to is that ultimately we're here to make people's lives better. It's not to lend money or to give grants. That's a way that we deliver an outcome. The outcome is to improve people's lives. So if we're doing something that is not achieving that outcome, means that we are doing something wrong, and we need to be able to identify that. So when you kind of think about what does the accountability mechanism stand for, what's its purpose, I have two functions in front of my mind. The first absolutely is to find a process through which affected people, people affected from ADB supported projects can provide their voice to seek redress for things that have gone wrong. But secondly, from a governance perspective, the accountability mechanism is important to be able to ensure that we can learn and grow as an organization and do development better. That's fundamental. There will always be mistakes making along when an agency is seeking to do development well. But we have to be an organization that continues to grow and continues to acknowledge that mistakes happen and that we put things right and that we improve as we go along. So the working group was established last year to review the accountability mechanism. and the time is right to do this. The last time we reviewed the accountability mechanism was in 2012. Things have changed. We've got a new ESF. There are more accountability mechanism complaints coming to us. Best practice has evolved. Good policy papers have come out, and we need to acknowledge that and see if we, as an organisation, can continue to grow and improve ourselves. The working group itself. The process of the working group. We have had an external review. It's on our website, and we've got a consultation paper out at the moment, and there are a number of questions that are out there, and I encourage anyone who cares about improving the accountability mechanism, and I suspect that's everyone here, to ensure that your voices are heard in that consultation process. We are at the moment in a data and collection mode, so we are listening. So I won't be making today any kind of fundamental comments about what my views are on particular issues, but I will, at this point, I think, identify some of the themes that we are hearing. And I would say that a number of the themes I heard just now are coming through loud and strong in some of the consultations that we are hearing as well. Timeframes, I think, is something that we're hearing a lot about. So this question around justice needing to be done quickly, processes need to be faster. That actually impacts on resources as well. But it also, I think, makes us need to think about the timeframes within the process, and as well as that, do we have set limits for dispute resolution? We can't keep things dragging on. There's this real question that keeps coming up around accessibility. And for me, there's sort of two parts to this. There's this question around visibility and knowledge. How do we ensure that people know what options are in front of them? And I think we've heard already today that another few stories there about how that question around visibility has come up and it's been of concern. Then there's this question around, and the same accessibility question around, for want of a better word, the thresholds that people need to meet. So at the moment, we hear quite a bit about a question around prior good faith efforts, and I think that's something we need to take a look at. But I can also see there are different views on this, and we need to be able to navigate this quite carefully so that we can ensure that redress is done at the quickest, as assessed, triaged and achieved at the most efficient and quickest way possible. Compliance review can take quite a long time, even if we can cut down the process. So for me, this comes back to this question around redress ecosystems. Accountability mechanism exists in a broader ecosystem of grievance redressed systems, and we need to think about how do they fit and work together well. There is also something that I heard today, and it's perhaps something that needs more visibility as we go through our process around response. And ensuring that we can think about how, think about who is involved in developing response and how is that managed going forward? How does that continue to have visibility, both to the board and to, of course, those who are affected? I think I'll leave it there, except to say one last thing that I picked up in my meetings over the last couple of days as well with various NGOs, CSOs, and that is there's this question for me around biodiversity as well. So in some cases, the affected people that we rely on to complain, put in a complaint to accountability mechanism is quite diffuse. It's quite diffuse in the case of, for example, of biodiversity loss. So I think that is something that personally I'd like to take a look as we move forward as well. Kia ora koutou, thank you.
Thank you very much, Llewellyn. Now I would like to invite Ramani Kunanayagam, who is the chair of the Compliance Review Panel at the ADB Accountability Mechanism. Ramani.
Thank you so much, Iromi, and good morning, everyone. I think I'd really like to thank our civil society panelists. For me, I joined the ADB Accountability Mechanism in November last year, so I have not been here very long. And it was quite an eye-opener to me to hear from people directly from the ground on how they have experienced impacts and how they have perceived whether, remedy, redress, whether that has worked or not worked in their cases, and also the access question and the confusion between who's who in this landscape in terms of project implementation agencies and the accountability mechanism. So I'd like to offer some reflections. I don't want to comment on any of the cases directly. Some of those cases are live with us, and I don't think it's appropriate for me to comment. I don't know all the details about some of the past cases. But I'd like to go back to perhaps, in the context of the review and how accountability can be made more effective. I'd like to go back to the basics about why an accountability mechanism was first set up. The first setting up of an accountability mechanism, which goes back now over 33 years with the World Bank Inspection Panel, and that came out of the protests over the Narmada Dam in India, which led the World Bank to think about what it needed to do and have an independent mechanism. So it is, for me, it's based on three principles. It's an access to justice mechanism for affected people to an independent mechanism. And I think all these words are really important. So because it is, it's set up so that affected people can actually access a mechanism. They believe it's independent, it's neutral, and can look at these issues from that perspective. And I think if we don't meet those fundamental principles, then we as a mechanism are failing in our task. So I think that's very important. It's also, and it's been written about extensively in academic literature, it is a bottom-up, citizen-driven, mechanism where the voices of those, who are least advantaged, disempowered to a great extent, their voices can be heard through the mechanism at the highest levels of the organization, which is the board. And I think we heard this from all our panelists about, how project affected people have, feel about projects. And so therefore, I think there should not be, the mechanism has to be able to work so that people can access the mechanism. Now, I would like to draw a distinction between the role of management and the role of a mechanism. And I think, Llewellyn, you spoke about the ecosystem of grievance redress services and all, which I think are extremely important. And, I think it's very important that there are very robust grievance processes at the project level. I think ADB has plans to set up one at the headquarters or corporate level. And I think we support that extensively. We support that strongly because I think people, project affected people should have many avenues to access those services. But those services should not be a prohibition or a limitation factor to come to an independent mechanism. And there are many reasons why people would want to access an independent mechanism. We heard about retaliation, we heard about confidentiality, there could be a lack of confidence, or there could be simply frustration that, the existing processes are not working for you. So in my view, and I feel this very strongly, because as an access to justice mechanism, you cannot limit how people can access the mechanism. People should be free to access the mechanism and trust the mechanism. And Conversely, I would like to also make another distinction, which is that, we fully support, and we heard from many of you, and Radhika, the last speaker, that redress is at the heart of this process. And I think so. I do agree that redress should happen as quickly as possible, but we also have to understand redress in the context of sustainability of redress. I think quick and dirty, but not long lasting, or sort of longer, more detailed, but with the endurance. So I think we have to understand redress from that context, and we have to understand how redress works from a transparency and a credibility perspective. So redress, to me, can come about through management systems. It can also come about through problem solving. It can also come about through a compliance review process where our reports are public, they're transparent, people can see the findings, and they can make up their minds about whether there has been redress through that process, through the management action plans, which the CRP also is empowered to monitor. So I think there are different pathways here. There are different purposes. I think depending on the complexity of the issue, the severity of the issue, the circumstances that frame the issue, I think there are, the pathways have different values, if you like. And I think all of that has to be put into the mix. I think, we should not lose. Okay, I can see my time's up. I'm so sorry. Can I have one last sentence? I hate running over time, so I'm very sorry. I think, my okay, anyway, my trend of thought's gone, so I shall stop. Thank you.
Thank you, Ramani. Maybe you can, if your last point comes back to you, we can take it up in the Q&A. And finally, we have Imrana Jalal, the head of the Office of the Special Project Facilitator at the ADB Accountability Mechanism. Imrana, over to you.
Thank you, Iromi, and thank you to all of you for your comments. It's always a unique experience at the ADB annual meetings to sit here and take the body blows from civil society, both on behalf of ourselves and on behalf of management. But of course, it's all done in the spirit of trying to solve problems and trying to provide remedies to those who are negatively impacted from our projects. So of course, your comments are well taken. Like Ramani, I can't comment on cases that we are currently dealing with, and a number of the points made by you are about cases that we are currently dealing with, but let me at least make some general comments. So what I've heard today is falls into two buckets of issues. The first one is about remedy. And of course, I think you all know that the banks, all our banks are struggling with the issue of remedies and what to do about it. And I think IFC has come up with a recent plan, and I applaud them for taking the initiative. But I do want to remind ourselves that the implementation of remedies does not lie in the hands of the accountability mechanism, and that is often forgotten when criticisms are leveled in our direction. Is that in terms of compliance makes the findings, the investigation findings, and management develops the remedial action plan or the management action plan. And it is management who implements the remedies. So I think it's important to constantly remind ourselves of that. Now, we do have extensive monitoring capabilities. Our policy does not limit our monitoring. So we do report to the management and we do report to the board through our monitoring reports on how those remedies are being implemented. So the second bucket of issues I see as being policy shortcomings, and both Ramani and Llewellyn have referred to these. One is a very important one, which is the issue of time limits. So the criticisms that have been leveled to us are fair criticisms, but I would like again to remind ourselves that The whole purpose of dispute resolution and problem solving is based on the voluntary participation. And during that voluntary participation, if the parties don't budge and they don't move forward, then it becomes very difficult to try to solve the problem, especially given that our policy, unlike all the policies of the other banks, I think 90% of them have time limits on dispute resolution. We have no time limits. So I cannot say to the parties in dispute, listen, we've got 1 year to solve this problem. Let's put our issues on the table and work through them one by one. We only have 1 year. So in a sense, it's a stalemate. It's a stalemate when the parties don't want to move forward. So I think it's the point about time limits is a very, very important one, and it's something that we should look at closely, especially those cases that have been sitting with us for years without a willingness on either part to compromise in any way. Again, I think a lot has been said. Like Ramani, I strongly believe in a management-led process of problem solving and dispute resolution, where there is willingness on the part of the parties to engage in the management-led process. I see the GRS service at the World Bank, which was established when I was chair of the inspection panel, as a very important, timely, important institution. And we certainly don't want to be dealing with the run-of-the-mill cases, the 1 or 2 complainants that have minor issues that can be well sorted out by a grievance redress service or a project grievance redress mechanism. Keeping in mind always the differences between them. The GRM is usually located within the project management unit. It is mainly peopled by staff of government or of the corporation, and in some cases the community, but it is not independent. The grievance redress service of any bank is an effective way to solve complaints, but it is not independent. A project team led by management, problem-solving process led by management and project team can be effective, but it is not independent. The accountability mechanism process is independent, and that is what needs to be remembered constantly, that our process is independent, it's neutral, it's objective, we don't take sides, we try to solve the problem for all parties. And I see I've got 30 seconds left. And in the case of retaliation, gender-based violence, and so on, I believe that even an independent problem-solving process may be an ineffective response to solving problems, and matters like that should lie with a compliance review panel. Thank you.
Thank you, Imrana, and thank you to all our panelists for your extremely rich and frank perspectives. We can now open for Q&A. And just to mention that we have got extra time for this panel, so please do stay on beyond 10:30 so that we can have a really good dialogue with our panelists here today. So like I mentioned before, we are taking questions because we are live on Zoom as well. We're taking questions on Pigeonhole, but we will prioritize folks here in the audience today. We have a couple of mics, so please raise your hand and someone will come to you with a mic. And just to say, we request that you limit it to questions and not long statements, and perhaps short comments if you have any, but we do encourage questions as much as possible. And so you feel free to raise your hands if you have any questions. And what I will do is I will actually take a question from Ryan Hassan, the Executive Director of NGO Forum on ADB, who was actually meant to be a panelist here today, but unfortunately was not granted his visa. So I will take a question from Ryan first online, and then we will move on to the audience. So Ryan's question is, if meaningful consultations and information disclosure is not done aiming affected communities, will ADB Accountability Mechanism consider them as non-compliant? And if yes, what does compliance mean? And if they could elaborate why. So maybe we could take a round of questions and then we can come back to our panelists.
Hi, good morning. Stephanie Mwaku with Accountability Council. I just wanted to actually see if, Mr. Roberts, you could directly answer the question that Radhika raised around essentially if communities are aware of the different grievance mechanism options that they have, but still with that awareness choose to go to the independent accountability mechanism, understanding maybe the time limits or whatnot. What is the harm in allowing that access? And maybe how can we see allowing access as not maybe a threat to the ADB, but a benefit to the institution? Thank you.
Anyone else?
Hi, I'm Arman from Armavir Development Center. I did mention about this before as well, about social accountability. Does ADB look into partnering with NGOs to provide social accountability and local engagement in these processes in order to prevent grievances and bigger problems? We had a really great case of cooperation with ADB in Armenia. So just where does the social accountability fit in this agenda?
Thank you. So I think we have 3 questions for now, and maybe we can take that and then a second round of questions.
So I'll take the first question from Rayan because it was directed to compliance. So yes, of course, in an investigation process, we would look at the consultation and we could have a finding of non-compliance if that is what we determine, right? I'd like to speak more from my experience sitting on the World Bank inspection panel because I'm so new in the ADB AM. I don't have too many examples as yet. But if you look at the World Bank inspection panel investigation reports, all of which are public on their website, you would see that in the majority of cases, there are non-compliance findings on consultation. And how do we determine that? I think it is a complex process in determining that, and it's also a question of judgment because this is not an exact science. The context, of course, is everything here. But in a recent case we worked on in Bolivia, and the complaint, it was a road rehabilitation project, and the complaint came from indigenous groups. And we had a finding of non-compliance on the consultation and the broad community, free, prior, informed consultation. And, the World Bank had done extensive consultation. They provided us with lots and lots of documents of meetings. They had records of the meetings, the number of attendees, photographs, videos. So it is not just a question of, how many meetings you had and how many people attended those meetings, but it was also a question of what information was provided to the communities in those meetings. And we found that the environmental and social impact assessment had fallen short quite heavily because it had made the assumption, because it was a road rehabilitation project, there would be minimal impacts on the communities. And we actually found there were extensive impacts on the communities because, one, it was not a sort of simple road rehabilitation project. It was a major, basically taking a very small road and turning it into a 4-lane highway connecting all the way to Brazil, the Brazilian border. But also there were induced and indirect impacts, which meant that people were really worried, not worried, but there were sort of outside major corporations coming in and opening the area up for large scale farming, and also a lot of impacts associated with also water resources and quarries that had been done all over on the side of the road. We were almost like mini mining projects, and then a whole lot of issues associated with that. But I don't want to go into all the details. But we did have a non-compliance findings, and I would also like to add that the World Bank itself looked at this project a lot more intensively after the complaint came to the inspection panel, and they actually suspended the project for several months. They came up with 97 non-compliances on their side and asked the government to give the government 3 months to fix those non-compliances. So yeah, that's just to share. But there are many, many cases from the inspection panel on non-compliance on consultation.
Thanks, Ramani. I think Llewellyn, over to you.
Kia ora, and thank you for the question on if communities are aware of the timeframe, of the options, and they choose to go, why can't they go for directly into accountability mechanism review or dispute resolution? A compliance review. And the question was really, what was the harm if you go from one to the other I think the thing that first of all, what I can say is that we are, as I mentioned before, in listening mode, and we are getting different views from different people, right? So we're getting views that are different from from affected people, might be slightly different to CSOs, that might be different from governments, that might be different from operators, which might be different from ADB. And they all have their own perspectives to come into this that we need to navigate and balance as we go through and we think about where do we land on accountability policy. I think so. That's the reason why when I started this conversation earlier, I mentioned the need to think about what are the outcomes that we're trying to achieve here. We're trying to achieve for dispute resolution, which is what most people want, is they want a resolution that is quick and efficient and it meets people's requirements. Sometimes though, people want to see something done, that they're concerned that this is a bigger issue, that this is something that is the tip of the iceberg, and that there are systemic issues that need to be considered. There's quite often a very good place for the accountability mechanism to be involved in. So we do need to be aware that the moment that you get into to compliance review, it is going to take longer. That does have costs. That has costs for times for people to see redress. It has costs for the project and the implementation. It has reputational costs for governments, potentially. And so all of these do need to be thought about in the context of how do we ensure that the best outcome can be achieved in the way that we develop the accountability mechanism. So that would be my answer to what is the harm. On the other question was around social accountability. I'm not quite sure I can answer this in a way that you might find satisfactory. I think the way that I think I understand the question is this question around, well, if there is redress that's needing to be thought about, well, where is the role of the accountability of the affected people in determining what the redress looks like? I think that was kind of the way I took the question. And I think it's a fair one. If you're thinking about, the redress action plan and thinking about, well, how are we going to, move forward in a way that addresses the problems that have been identified in a compliance review, then it does make sense that we are thinking about ensuring that the redress action plan actually achieves the outcomes that we are wanting to achieve. Again, I come at this from an outcomes perspective. I think that's a very I think that's from a development perspective, thinking through problems through what you're trying to achieve, the outcomes is always a good place to start. Kia ora.
Thank you. Over to you, Imrana.
Thank you, Romy. I just want to address the question of accessibility posed by both Radhika and Stephanie about what are we concerned about. Clearly, our threshold levels are very, very low in comparison to other banks. And I think the other day at another session where Stephanie presented the data showing that access to our mechanism is only 12% of complaints get through to us, compared to, for example, the EIB, which the head of the mechanism is sitting there, Vasco, where something like 70% of complaints get through to them, and then there's the inspection panel with 48%. So we are the lowest of the big banks. There's only one other mechanism, which is the AIIB, which is lower than us, and they have no cases. So that, of course, is a concern that, the data doesn't lie. It's showing how difficult access to us is. Now, the direct question posed by Radhika and Stephanie is, what are we concerned about? I don't think that we are concerned, because we know, for example, in the analysis done by IFC, which has a very open policy of access, that over 25 years, they still have only about 15 or 16 cases a year. And in the CAO's policy, their policy gives autonomy and agency to the complainants to choose. So at the CAO, I think some of you know, the complainants are asked, would you like to have access to a management-led grievance process? And the vast majority want that. Or would you like us to try and problem solve or dispute resolve your matter on behalf of you? And yet the numbers are not huge. So I think that that's not something that we should be concerned about. I'm a great believer in, personally, that the project teams and grievance redress services ought to deal with the vast majority of complaints. What we should be dealing with are the complex cases that are very difficult, where there's a trust deficit, where there's allegations of retaliation or potential retaliation, where the cases are so complex with multiple parties. These are the cases that we should be dealing with. And to my mind, if we expand the access provisions, we will probably increase to about 25% of complaints coming through. And I'm basing that on the African Development Bank and MiCo at the IADB, which has around 1/4 of the cases that they deal with. So 25% of the cases get through to them. So yes, thank you.
Thank you, Ramani. Do we have any questions from the audience? I can see Dustin and Vasco.
Thank you. My name is Dustin Schäfer. I work with Urgewald. Going back to the access question and to the different argumentations that you have brought up between the different stakeholders, I would like to remind us that there are voluntary risk takers and involuntary risk takers. Voluntary risk takers can be the ADB that decides whether they want to provide more access or less access. People potentially affected by those projects and investments don't have the choice to set up any kind of management risk systems if an investment harms the people on the ground. And I think we have to consider that. And I also would like to remind us that we hire experts, the best experts around the world in terms of accountability, to make good decisions and to run the mechanisms. And I don't see the point why management or the board should restrict the ability for the experts within the mechanisms to make good decisions in terms of access and how they deal with cases. Even though there are more cases, I'm very confident that those people could decide whether those cases can be also handled with other mechanisms if this is the case. So I would just give them all the abilities to decide and refer to other mechanisms, but not restrict access to the detriment of the people who want to go to the independent mechanisms. Thank you.
Yeah. I'm Vasco from the EIB complaints mechanism. Just wanted to offer a bit of reflection on this point of access to the mechanisms, because I see it is something that has been discussed and coming up in different sessions. As Imran was saying, we do have around 70% of the cases that we receive are considerable admissible for us. We do have a broader mandate than that of the ADB Accountability Mechanism. We have it because it comes from the European context. So our current mandate focuses on maladministration of the bank, of the EIB, which allows us to go beyond project-related complaints. So we do assess and handle those. Nevertheless, I do agree that management grievance mechanisms are very important to exist, and we do not have that at the European Investment Bank. We do have, as in all the other institutions, every project promoter needs to set up a project level grievance mechanism. I can tell you that in all the cases that we have received and in which we have analyzed, none of those work properly. And this is a very big issue. I think it's very, very important that at the outset that there's a capacity building exercise to explain to promoters how these mechanisms should exist, develop, and provide redress to communities and people impacted by projects. And we are happy to do that, as I know that Ramani and Imran do. But even if those are perfect, and even if those exist, there are always cases, retaliation, sexually based violence that cannot go through the project level mechanism. And what I would say is that we should give and we should trust the capable hands of the accountability mechanisms in each institution to be able to sort out those cases that have to be handled by the mechanisms and those that maybe should be handled by management level mechanisms. Because I can tell you, every 2 weeks when we sit down in our team to assess all the cases that we receive and we assess whether they are admissible or not, we do have a thorough analysis and we do see which cases will be better handled by us and which will be better handled by management or by the project teams. But we have the expertise of assessing whether there is a risk of retaliation, where there is a risk of systemic issue that triggers the need for the mechanism to be involved, and then to provide this feedback loop to the institution to make the institution be better. So I don't think that there's it's not an alternative, right? Either one or the other. I think both things can exist. What I don't believe is that it should be a requirement or a criteria for people to access the independent accountability mechanism. They should not be forced to go first to a management level mechanism. In my view, this decision should be in the hands of the accountability mechanism to see, okay, this case should be handled at the management level and together with the complainant to make that informed decision. I think that, in my view, this would be the best way forward in order to have an effective mechanism that takes care of the cases that really need to be handled by the mechanism, and at the same point to devolve the responsibility to management and to project promoters in order for them to address the cases that they should be addressing. Thank you.
Thank you. And we are almost out of time, so I'm going to give the last question to Prabin. Yes, over there.
Yeah, thank you, Iromi. I think Vasco kind of partly said what I already wanted to raise too. I think the issue, if it is going to be a requirement, that the complainants first have to go through these management grievance redress mechanisms before they can access an IAM, independent accountability mechanism, that's going to be a huge loss or huge burden, huge terrible mistake again, that the ADB might be doing during this accountability mechanism policy review. Because again, from the ground up perspective or ground perspective, we are talking about a management that don't even talking about management or project implementers that don't even tell the affected communities that these are ADB projects. There are these safeguards that are applicable. There are these additional redress mechanisms that might be that you can access, beyond these national mechanisms that they regularly access or often access. The communities often access. But I think, again, the key point here should be that it should be the communities who decide where they want to go. As I think Imran already said in the case of IFC CAO, if they want to go to the management level grievance mechanism, if they want to come to an independent accountability mechanism, no. And in that sense, I think I would ask again, if ADB or the board or the accountability mechanism has undertaken a study about what kind of cases are coming to the accountability mechanism, and what kind of cases have not been able to come to the accountability mechanism. Are these minor cases? Are these complex cases that you are getting? And I think that's where we can talk about outcomes or the decision, making decision about where where do we strengthen. Do we strengthen the management level grievance mechanisms, or do we strengthen more access to the accountability mechanism? No, because I personally believe, based on research that we have seen, it's mostly complex cases that are coming to the accountability mechanism, and many complex cases have not even been able to come to the accountability mechanism because of this eligibility requirement. I would even say bogus eligibility requirement, that requires prior good faith effort. Often brings a lot of retaliation on the complainants, direct and indirect retaliations. No, so yeah, if there has been a study, please let us know about a study about what kind of cases are coming to accountability mechanism.
Thank you, Prabin. I'd like to hand it over back to our panelists for responses to the questions and what was raised. So maybe anyone, not just from the ADB, if there are any panelists who would like to respond to what has been raised from the audience, but also maybe from what the others have also said. And since we are coming to an end, so maybe keep it short and sweet, but please do take the opportunity to share whatever you like.
I want to start. I think, of course, the time limit is one of the major issue for us, and so sometime the impacts appear after the time limit is over. So that's one of the problems. But my experience is that with all these availability of the mechanisms, etc., accessing accountability mechanisms are still very, very hard. And also, I believe that having a better safeguard implementation is very, very important. But unfortunately, it's not happening on the ground. So if you can improve that level, if you support the member countries to build the better safeguard, having a scoping consultations and like Prabin mentioned about that, giving them information about the availability of safeguards and the accountability mechanism. I think there are several things you need to improve at the national level. Unfortunately, many of our countries, the local legislations are very, very weak. So they have been developed 30 years ago, and the situations have very much changed right now. So none of these legislations are ready for current situation. So I think maybe ADB should also consider supporting the member countries to build their own legislations to bring all these best practices into that one. It's not only have the accountability mechanisms at the bank level, improvements will not necessarily go into the communities unless you do that part. Thank you.
Thank you, Hemantha. So I have Radhika, and then I have Jiten and Sukarel.
Me too. In the recent Southeast Asian consultations that happened, I think there's a summary that was released. What was really interesting for me was that every group of stakeholders, like all the different people you mentioned, agreed on one thing, which was that disclosure of accountability mechanisms is not happening well enough at the community level. And so if that is something we can all agree on, then that means that is something we must improve. And we already have an ESS, a new ESS that focuses on disclosure of the accountability mechanism as part of meaningful consultation. We've also included another recommendation in the joint 29 joint civil society recommendations that we submitted, which is that could we explore a situation where on a quarterly basis, the accountability mechanism requests proof from management that this requirement is being monitored? so that management has a requirement to monitor the fact that this is being disclosed, and the AM on a quarterly basis requests proof of that. I think that could be an interesting innovation in like making sure that this is happening. But of course, we'd have to hear from management stakeholders on if that is even possible. But that is just a suggestion that I think could really help with the outreach, especially for financial intermediary financing.
Sorry, Jiten, just before, just to say we have been informed that we do actually have to leave the stage. I'm really sorry for those of you who did put your hands up. So maybe we'll give Jiten the last word since you already have the mic. Yeah, extremely sorry, but we do have to leave now.
All right. Yeah, just briefly, I think the entire conversation also calls the need for strengthening the accountability mechanism. And even like, for example, when Imran was sharing, I feel that it's really important to strengthen even the problem solving process, for example, in terms of mandate and also in terms of ability to coordinate and influence the government. And then also monitoring the grievance mechanism at the local level as well, not just at the larger level, because there's a lot of violations actually happening even at the local level. And finally, also to give to consider the special impact of ADB project in the conflict affected areas as well, so which means the need for the risk assessment, due to conflict as well. Yeah. So I just want to end there. Thank you.
Thank you very much to all our panelists for their extremely frank and rich perspectives. And thank you to our audience for your questions and also for staying through and spending this morning with us. And you can see the kind of change that we would like as CSOs, but also from, I think, management to kind of see the change that we would like from the accountability mechanism review. And overall, I think you have a lot of ideas about from removal of good faith engagement, for example. But I think overall, what we do want to see is also a culture change in how accountability and access to accountability is viewed, and not to see communities, not to put a lot of barriers and make it difficult for communities to access, but actually to make it easier and to change the culture of not seeing affected communities as problematic or anti-development, but also people on this same journey towards equitable and sustainable development. And thank you once again. And please do take a look at the Voices of the Affected exhibition that you see at the back, where folks from affected communities have shared objects and stories from their experiences through ADB projects. Thank you once again, and thank you to our panelists.
Hi everyone, we would like to invite everyone for our next session at 11. It's entitled Infrastructure in a Changing World, Financing Resilience in Infrastructure Strategies by Global Infrastructure, Basel Foundation, and Green Finance Forum of 60. So the next session starts in 15 minutes. Please do stay if you're interested to join the session. Thank you.